did want to make one final statement about Common Core. And I guess it's this. It's important that we recognize. And when we try to fight this, we have to be very rational and not let ourselves get too angry about it because they tune you out. The things that are coming with Common Core are so insidious that they have to be stopped. I will say this though, and I mean this sincerely. It's really good that moms and if there's one redeeming grace about Common Core, it's waking up people. But for 40 years this has been happening in our schools. For 40 years we've been walking down this line. And the reason we're here now is because moms and dads have let it happen. I mean, we're busy, we have to work multiple jobs, but we wouldn't be here now. And what we're asking you to do now is begin the process of trying to take it back. But if you look around you, you'll see here, there are probably more grandmas and grandpas here than there are moms and dads. That's true every place I speak. Right? So we've got to get involved with this now. Let this be that wake-up call. Recognize that we're here in large part because for too long we've allowed the schools to educate our kids without any question. That has to begin to change. And if Common Core does anything productive that gets us to see that, then it's a good thing. We've got to keep fighting it. So I'll take any questions you have. We got the mic over here and then we'll go over here. Yes, ma'am.
All right, since I have the mic, I'll start. I might sound really naive, but I keep hearing that there was a lot of money given to this 46 states that agreed to take the money under Race to the Top, as long as they would then roll out this Common Core program. So, you know, even though we can't hold the federal government accountable directly, we have legislators at the state level who agree to be bribed. But the money, there must have been strings attached. There must be, you know, legal issues going on, and so it's a web. And just to say we don't like the curriculum, I mean, obviously we're going to get shot down. So how do you go at the foundation? Who and what is involved in bringing down the foundation of how this got into the states?
Okay, great question. First thing I would say is it's the next time they tell you it's not a federal curriculum, you've got all sorts of ammunition here. The next time they tell you that states are free to do what they want, how about Indiana? Indiana became the first state to kind of pull out of Common Core. And as you saw just a couple days ago, the federal government basically told Indiana that you're going to have to demonstrate to us, to our satisfaction, that the new standards you put in are as good as Common Core, which means are as sociological as Common Core. And if you don't, we will repeal your waiver from No Child Left Behind, and we will withhold $200 million of federal education funding from your state. So when they tell you that states were free to choose this, there are no penalties, it's all just garbage. Now that Indiana pulled out, you see what's happening, right? But here's the deal. I wouldn't be too discouraged because, first of all, how do you fix this? You got to fix it in the state. So don't worry about the federal government. You have a daunting task. I've got problems in Wisconsin when the Republicans control everything. You are really behind an 8 ball here. But I would say you do the best you can. As they say, you get involved with organizations like this that are trying to move legislators. Here's the thing. The reason the feds are being so absolutely punitive on Indiana is because Indiana's the first. Oklahoma's about to go next. Missouri is about to go next after that. I don't know what it's going to take. 6 states, 8 states, 12 states, I don't know. But when we reach a certain number of states, the federal government's ability to punish them all is going to collapse. So even if in Illinois, you can't ultimately get to the point where you're one of those states, and it's going to be hard for you. Although, again, if you'd have told me a month ago that the Chicago Teachers Union in Barack Obama's backyard would have not just voted to pull out of it, but would have excoriated that, I wouldn't have believed it. So even here you can make inroads. Work on your state and local legislators. Be relentless. This is an election year. That's what you do now. You're about a year behind where we are in Wisconsin on this. So just keep doing it. This is not over. Right now as we speak, 46 states took it. There are now 28 states that are trying to completely repeal it or get out of most of it. There are over 300 pieces of legislation sitting in legislatures in over 40 states trying to radically deracinate or get rid of Common Core altogether. These are huge moves forwards. You're going to see in the next couple months Oklahoma, Missouri, Follow Indiana. And after that, there are 6 other states that are really struggling to get rid of it. South Carolina right after that. So at some point, you reach the point where the feds can no longer intimidate and the structure will collapse of its own accord. You have to do what you can in Illinois. And the first thing you have to do is, you see this room? You need 3 times this many. And you need more moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, to get more moms and dads to come. What kills this is moms and dads. If parents begin to and that's what's happening in Wisconsin. They think the state legislator punted. They wouldn't vote on anything. They thought it would go away. Governor Walker's, it was estimated that Governor Walker was receiving about 10,000 calls a month protesting Common Core, and he asked to get reelected as governor. That's how you do it. You're be in it for the long haul, but recognize that if it goes from many of the states, it's going to have to go in all. So that's where you start. Do what you can do, and let the rest of the states keep doing what they're doing. That's where I would start with.
Okay, Dr. Pesta, we have a next question?
We'll go next. We'll go next to her. I just saw her hand there. No, you can go. So go ahead.
Okay.
And then when we're done, we'll ask this lady.
Thank you. I teach ABE GD at the College of Lake County.
Okay.
Pearson View is
Oh,
the
boy.
sole controller of the GD test. Please speak about Common Core and the new GD.
Well, I haven't studied it in your state much, but I can tell you this, in Wisconsin, it was an outrage. Just this year, Wisconsin because of Pearson Publishing, Wisconsin completely transformed its GED requirements to Common Core. So you have adult moms and dads who in their spare time have been busting their butts studying for the GEDs. This year, without any warning or any grandfathering, the state of Wisconsin changed the GED to Common Core. Now those moms and dads can't pass it, and the state told them, tough, go back and start over. That's what happened with Common Core. Think about the SAT with regards to this as well. You've got, before schools have even graduated one student with 8 or 10 years of Common Core, they've only got one. You're going to now demand that the SAT starting later this year will be completely Common Core compliant. How are your kids going to pass them? As ridiculous as it is, they haven't even done it for more than a year. They're on a fast track for this because they know the clock is ticking. They know that's why they have a 2-year head start on you. That's why 95% of you don't know anything about it, and it's the law of your schools. Because they know the minute you find out, you're going to raise holy hell, and they're just banking on the fact that it'll be way too late by the time you wake up. And you're right, the GEDs have gone over, which means adult moms and dads are going to have to now go back and reteach themselves Common Core simply to get a high school diploma. This is wicked from the top to the bottom.
This isn't quite a question, but I just want to know if you deal at all with the beginnings of where Common Core originated. I mean, I have people who tell me, a lot older than I am, that they saw it happening, their children were doing it back in the 50s. And then you have all these things leading up to the UN, the Agenda 21, and different theories of the schools that Mueller that had and everything. And then Bill Gates was a great big funder of UNESCO. And out of this is what the Common Core is. Same thing, to indoctrinate, to spread socialism. Finally, they got it in the United States with getting socialism, because Obama would go for it, of course, because that's the agenda of him and Bill Gates too.
Yeah, if I had 5 hours, if you wanted to sit here for 5 hours, I could take you all the way back to the 2 pioneers of public school education, John Dewey and Horace Mann, both confirmed Marxists. Dewey and Horace Mann, you see their names plastered all over the schools. They are the ones who brought public education the way we now have it into this country. And the entire premise of it was socialist and Marxist. So we could go back a long way and do it. Like I said, this is not new. Just out of curiosity, how many of you know what UNESCO's founding motto was of the United Nations Education Wing? Its founding motto was, your kids are our kids. That's the United Nations. And by the way, Bill Gates and Michael Barber of Pearson Publishing, they've already approached the United Nations. They want Common Core to be a global curriculum, not just an American one.
That raises my point about the teacher. I've gone through education classes, and that's where the teachers go along with Common Core. It's them against the parents. I mean, how do we address that issue?
Well, that's a great point, because think about this. In a few years' time, as this now begins, because all the teachers are going to have to change how they're taught to be able to teach Common Core. In about 5 or 6 years, we will not graduate teachers anymore who can do any kind of pedagogy but Common Core. That's what they're waiting for. And why are some of the teachers union? I mentioned that I don't believe for 1 second Karen Lewis is sympathetic to our cause. But why in the world are the teachers unions beginning to push back against this? Because it's dawned on the teachers unions that in a few years you're going to have a lot of young ignorant teachers who only know Common Core and a lot of senior tenured teachers who remember when education actually worked a little bit. They will love to replace those senior highly paid teachers with know-nothing kids who only know Common Core. I think that's starting to dawn on the teachers unions.
Pesta, before, I'm sorry, you're continuing.
Just to punctuate that, what can we do about it? Well, remember back in the last presidential election how each of the 5 Republican primary candidates talked about eliminating the Department of Education? And then no sooner did we pick one of them than it never came up again? That's a good start. Let's work on trying to repeal the Department of Education. Also, try to find ways to break the monopoly of the teacher colleges in educating our kids. These are tall orders, but they're the only answers I can give you right now.
We were so engaged in this discussion, we forgot to pass the buckets that we normally pass during our meeting. So as we continue to do our Q&A, we'll be passing around these blue buckets. If you're able and willing to give to our organization, we appreciate it. If you are not able to, don't feel compelled to. This is really just to cover the cost of the rental of this room. And we are not paid. We're all volunteers, so we really appreciate your help if you can do that.
And that's so true. I really encourage you to throw a few bucks in. They're doing it on their own dime. We come down on our own dime. We try to get some travel expenses back. So keep supporting all of these organizations because, like you said, there's big money in this. Unfortunately, not much of it's on our side. So we'll keep fighting it.
And we're gonna definitely help cover the expenses for Dr. Pesta to come down. So,
absolutely, they're going to happy to do that. So
their contributions help. Okay, next question, here we go.
One of the things that you've said a couple of times that I think needs a little bit more depth is talking about the SAT, because the impact of the SAT is your admission to university, which means Common Core destroys the ability of parents to do homeschooling because they're still going to have to answer to that SAT standard. So when they come into the SAT and take out the hardcore math and hardcore English and vocabulary and all the things that I had to study back in ancient history, it's going to be this Common Core sociology and this brainwashing, and that destroys the ability of people to homeschool, so you can't take your children and opt out.
exactly right. The long-term ambition of Common Core has to be the elimination, not just of homeschooling, but of private schooling altogether. And it's not just the SATs, but the ACTs are about to be transformed as well. Now, I would say by way of caution that we've already reached the point at the university level where we don't take the SATs and the ACTs as all that definitive. We just don't. And I think what is likely to happen moving forward is as colleges and universities start to see more and more less qualified kids applying, homeschool moms will be in greater demand, not less. I'll give you one example. You're a homeschool mom and dad. You have every right not to take the SAT and the ACT, and you will still get your kids into college. How do you do it? Every single university in this country has placement exams for English and math and science. In other words, even when kids get there, they'll give them placement exams. Every school has them. You call up the school you want your kid to go to and you say, hey, I'm a homeschool mom who has not taught my kid Common Core math, but I want to come to your university and make an appointment for my kid to take your English and math exams. They will do that for you. It won't cost you anything. And if your kids do well in reading, writing, math, those colleges are going to take them. So I would not let myself be frightened. That's what they want. They want you to be, and that's why our Catholic schools, God help them, have jumped into this Common Core mess. Because they're terrified that when that happens, our Catholic school kids may be better educated, but they won't be able to show it on these ridiculous tests. So a shocking number of our Catholic administrators of schools have decided it's better to make our kids look like the other kids than it is to teach them the way they're supposed to and have faith that it will sort itself out. It's a scare tactic. Right now, we don't bet the farm on the SATs and the ACTs. I'm not saying they're not important, but there are plenty of ways to get your kids right now into college without them. I think what the federal government is counting on is exactly the overreaction, right? You got to educate your kids by God the best way you can. Do what you can for them and have a little faith that you'll get them to where they need to be. One last more encouraging sign. Just last year, 10 of the biggest universities in this country, Stanford, Duke, Harvard, some of the Yale, some of the Ivy Leagues, they hired a full-time, highly compensated position. The job of that person is simply and solely to go around the country recruiting homeschool kids to college, right? So this is changing. I admit that if the federal government has their way, they're going to make it impossible for non-Common Core kids to go to school. I get it. But that's 5 and 10 years down the road. And if we worry so much about it that we change what we do to conform to them, then they've already won. You got it? That's one more front you have to try to fight it on.
Okay, next question. Here we go.
Hi, Doctor. Yeah, my name is Chris Ackerson. My wife and I, we're a homeschool family. We homeschool. We have 4 children, age 1 to 8. When we moved to Illinois, we made the choice to put our oldest in the public school system, but we also looked at some other options. My question to you, you kind of touched on a little bit as far as Catholic schools and their acceptance of Common Core. One thing that disturbed me the most was the national sexuality standards, and I'm curious if you know or you could speak to how the Catholic school system in total has embraced that, and how they are going about teaching that in the Catholic school system.
Well, right now, private schools and Christian schools aren't obligated to take it, so they can technically do what they want. And the big frustrating thing that you get from the private schools, the Catholic schools, is, oh, we're just going to take the good stuff and get rid of the bad. They do not see, they will not see, that you can't separate them in this. And that by making your Catholic school kids ultimately take the Common Core tests, you are going to force your teachers eventually to have to do the worst of this. That's the problem, but they're not listening. And why aren't they listening? Because there's a whole lot of money from Gates and others coming into the schools. That's the first thing. The second thing is they're terrified. Why would you send your kid to a Catholic school and pay $8,000 to do it if they're getting nothing but warmed over public school curriculum in a plaid skirt and a crucifix? It doesn't make any sense. So what they want is, they think that they need to justify you sending your kids to those schools by outperforming the kids on the tests. Whatever happened to faith formation? Whatever happened to classical education? So this is a big problem. So I would say they haven't thought it through. They look at this and when I showed it, I've given this talk before dozens and dozens of school administrators. What they always say is, well, we'll just never do that in our school. We just won't take it. Right? Okay, fine. But you know what? Some of the most, including the Bluest Eye. The Bluest Eye has already been being taught in 12 different Catholic school dioceses in this country. But it won't happen. And you know the argument you get, and as a Roman Catholic myself, I think I can say this. After everything that's gone on in the church, I think we've reached the point where trust us is no longer good enough. That's my view.
Dr. Pesta, my name is Les. I run a software and engineering firm. And based on this horrible prospect, I'm just totally wondering, where are the next generation of engineers going to come from?
This is a fantastic question. Oh boy. Think about what happened in Europe when they nationalized healthcare. Do you remember? They imported all the doctors from other countries. But pay attention, when Europe imported doctors, and you've got now the same doctor gap coming. American kids now, since the huge drop-offs in kids going to medical school, so they're going to have to do it here. What they did in Europe is they brought doctors in for other countries. But think about it. Why didn't England bring in doctors from Australia or Canada or even America? They brought them in from places like China and Pakistan. Why? They brought in doctors from countries who already had a long history of Marxist socialist control. In other words, they bring in an educated class and make them dependent on government, an educated class who already understands a greater lack of freedom. That's what will happen here. And as Milgram says, that's what's going to have to happen. They're going to need to start importing engineers and architects. That's what they're going to have to do it, because our kids won't be able to do this. And that, I think, is part of the long-term business. People have mentioned already, you guys are a smart audience. You've already mentioned things like UNESCO and Agenda 21. This is absolutely one of the planks of the one world government crowd, right? How are you going to destroy American entrepreneurship? How are you going to destroy American industry? You're going to dumb down the American worker. You're going to take away opportunities. And speaking of the homeschool stuff with regards to this, I don't know if you saw it, but last summer Barack Obama was in Ireland, where the American media didn't talk much about it. He spoke to 4,000 Irish school kids, and he said to them last summer, and I quote, As long as you have your Catholic schools and you have your Protestant schools, there will be no unity. We must move beyond the idea of private schooling altogether. That's what he said. And to answer your question finally with a punctuation point, exclamation point, I don't know if you're aware of this, but about a year and a half ago, President Obama, does anybody remember this? He never came back to it, but he mentioned in a public speech the idea, he floated the idea of creating 28 elite universities. You remember this? Some of you are shaking your heads. Now, this was his plan. He wanted to designate the entire Ivy League, plus schools like Stanford and Berkeley, as elite schools. These would be colleges that your and my kids couldn't go to anymore, no matter how smart they were. The government would pick the kids that would go to them, and they would have all tuition and all books and all room and board paid for. Now, you understand that in every functioning socialist society, you need a highly educated class of bureaucrats to run it? Well, you think about that. Your kid now, no matter how brilliant he or she is, will not get into Harvard. But the government will, and what do you think the government criterion to determine which kids go? I guarantee you the Obama kids would go, and I guarantee you the Bush kids would go. The Clinton kids would be there. Your kids and mine, not so much. Somebody's got to administer this. So that's another argument, right? You're going to have the elite stratus. That's it. That's where it's coming from.
A couple of months ago, I led a team of about 10 Tea Party folks to the District 214 school board meeting in Arlington Heights. And I was the first called on to speak with 3-minute limitation. I had a 25-page document. I started reading about what's wrong with Common Core. And they snickered at me when I ran out of time at the end of about the 3rd page. They didn't realize that we had 10 people with the same document, and the next person continued where I left off. So we had 30 minutes of non-stop anti-Common Core. Then a week later, the school superintendent sent me a little email and said, "We're not doing Common Core in District 214. Why did you even come? We're just doing the park testing."
So you're going to do the national park testing, which is Common Core geared,
right.
But you're not going to teach Common Core.
Right, and I've since attended other school board meetings or Republican meetings and they have a school board member in attendance, and they tell me we're not doing Common Core. Yet once or twice a month I get to go into a high school and teach the Vietnam War, and whenever I'm teaching the kids about Vietnam, I always pull the teacher aside and say, "What do you think of Common Core?" And they all say they hate it as long as there's no principal or administrator nearby. But obviously they're all teaching it, and they're lying to us. How do we convince them that they're doing Common Core and make them stop?
You cannot convince people of what they don't want to be made known. You can go and hand their own textbooks to them. You can go and copy their own assignments and put it in their faces. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. So, with all due respect, your schools aren't going to change this. There's too much, and your principals can't help you. It comes from, that's the big change from No Child Left Behind. This is completely top down. Every level of person you could get to, their job depends on getting this put in. They're not going to listen to you, they're going to listen to the people above them. Their careers are at stake. So the only way, so the schools, while I would continue to point out to them the absurdity of what they do, you can't expect them to fix this. Nor can you expect the federal government to budge on this. Your hope is to get, and in a state like yours it's tough, I understand, but to get state and local people educated. Your mom, you gotta vote for them. No one has to vote for these higher up people in the system. Nobody has to, your teachers don't get voted in or out. Their jobs depend on what their bosses tell them. You, on the other hand, have a chance to impact the people who want your vote. Your job is to get more of them aware of this. And I'm telling you, it was a long process in Wisconsin, but we're getting there. It's South Carolina, and it's interesting. Wisconsin is compared to you, it's a conservative state. But compared to most states, Wisconsin is pretty liberal. And yet, when you stop and think about it, states like South Carolina, I was just in North Dakota last weekend. I think North Dakota has the best shot to pull it off. They're just starting, but they'll get it out before we do. Do what you can do, and get more of your state and local politicians informed and armed. Because as the national dominoes start to tumble, then there'll be a groundswell in Chicago and in Illinois. And the last thing to take heart in, your kids will get their first Common Core tests next spring. It will be a nightmare. What you want to do is you're not going to be able to start an inferno, not in this state. But what you can do is keep the embers burning under Common Core. Keep going to talks, keep having more talks. I'm just one state away, we can come down and talk again if you want us to in various places. Get other people. Stotsky and Milgram, these two people I told you about that were in the room, they'll do what I do. You fly them here and put them in a hotel room. They will talk to as many people as you want about their experience. Keep a low burn on Common Core. And then next spring when those test results come in, a couple of little gas cans are going to blow the whole thing up. That's what you want to work for. Meaningful goals you can make. You got 9 months now. Nothing's going to happen in any state this summer because the legislatures are all gone and it's an election year. No one's doing anything. But when school starts again, you keep bringing in speakers, you keep educating people, you keep getting more people to know, you keep working on your legislators, and then when the tests come, you'll have a nice steady little fire, and then more people are going to, suddenly moms and dads who aren't paying any attention are going to come down asking you, what can we do about this? Be ready for that moment.
Okay, last question here from Jeff.
What about the trade and technical levels? One gentleman mentioned engineering. How are you going to teach that kind of stuff to people that need to be nurses, computer operators, welders?
The problem is that they don't really care. I mean, I really mean it. They don't care about educating your kids. They don't want your kids to succeed anyway. They want a society where everybody has functional literacy in math and English. That's it. They don't want your kids to move ahead.
All those people into the country.
You say you can't afford it?
Can't afford them.
What?
I need to get all this. Get a shift the whole population.
Well, you're right. You can't bring that many doctors in. What are the Europeans doing? They're letting people die. What are the Europeans doing? What are the Canadians doing with their healthcare system? The Canadians got about 118 million people, less than a third of what America has. And yet they're still helicoptering people over to get care here because they don't have enough beds. That's what they do. I mean, I get your frustration, but people die. People don't get treatment. And when it comes to jobs, look what's already happening in this country. How many people have if the people who just opted out of the workforce in the last 6 years were counted as unemployed, the unemployment rate would be about 19%.
You only got a 62% unemployment versus
You understand?
right now.
They don't seem worried about it, do they?
40% that aren't even working.
And you understand why the government's not worried about that? Because those are all the people that need government to do what they want, that live by government. Right? Those are the people, having those huge numbers of people who cannot help themselves and are dependent, those are the people that will turn over everything they have so long as government takes care of them. That's part of the plan. These two gentlemen right here were on it from the beginning. Two quick more questions and we'll be done.
All right.
Two quick ones, yeah.
I don't feel comfortable. Thank you. In our neighborhood, Highland Park, there was a demonstration in school complaining about education. We had a meeting, which was a closed meeting, in only 5 minutes. Usually I'm the only one at that meeting. We had 6 people at that meeting. At the other one, the newspapers came. There were 150 kids complaining, 30 or 40 parents. This is getting more and more.
Yes, it is.
Right.
You're right, the embers are building. In New York, one thing you might think about trying to organize as a patriot group, try to think about organizing and opt your kids out of Common Core. Protest your kids. Protest Common Core. Opt them out of school one day. New York did it. They had 30,000 moms and dads pull their kids from school. That's a big number. And that's New York, right? They're not any less liberal than your state. It can be done, but you build it one step at a time. Last question.
I don't know if you've seen it up in Wisconsin, but quite recently I've been seeing commercials on television here praising Common Core. And I think part of the reason that's happening is because of the pressure they're getting. It's beginning to get to them. They're having to spend money to try to avoid Common Core.
And that's a great point. Maybe that's a good place to stop, because what's happened is that the Common Core people for a whole year were perfectly content to say nothing and let it happen. Then the pushback started. We've reached the point now where they're doing that. And I gave 100 talks, never heard a word. Now, every time I go to it, I'm going to Marshfield, Wisconsin tomorrow. And now, before I even spoke one word in Marshfield, today in the newspaper, Marshfield published an editorial about, don't go listen to him, he's not credible on Common Core. So what they're doing is they're preemptively trying to stop it now, and that's good news. And as annoying as it is for me, it is good, because it shows you that they don't want you hearing this, right? So I will be in the back. If you have any private questions, come up and ask me. Thank you. Look, this state is not a lost cause if this many people showed up today. Get more involved. Thank you for listening.